Hi everyone, and in this week we are going to be reviewing Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is going to be providing an overview of ethics and specifically looking at ethical standards. So reaching decisions that are ethically sound is simultaneously among the most challenging and the most routine activities of life. So pervasive is ethics in daily life that many people are not even aware that ethical components are present in many of the decisions they reach daily. Some of these decisions are made quite easily, such as deciding whether to abide by the customs of an organization to which a person has belonged for a long time, while others are reached only after experiencing considerable anxiety, such as determining whether a conflict of interest exists. Possessing literacy in the fields of ethics can assist you with navigating through many difficult situations in life. Understanding what constitutes ethics requires learning about various models, concepts, and theories. This understanding assists you to identify ethical challenges and determine how to resolve the dilemmas posed in varying situations. Ethics is defined as the formal study of moral choices that conform to standards of conduct. It's derived from the Greek word ethos. Ethics is sometimes referred to as listening to one's conscience or making judgments between right and wrong. Ethics is sometimes confused with other areas of study, including morals, values, etiquettes, and laws. Okay, so ethics is the formal study of moral choices. It's the basis in philosophy. Morals, on the other hand, are the principles or the fundamental standards of right conduct that an individual internalizes. Right moral conduct is often based on traditional religious teachings and personal moral choices. Morals and ethics are related in that ethics puts personal and moral principles and standards into practice in the manner of making judgments with clarity and consistency. Etiquette is a separate area of study that bears a relationship with ethics. Etiquette refers to how humans relate to one another under certain circumstances. In other words, etiquette is a social code of customs and rituals. Examples of etiquette include courtesy, politeness, and proper dress. Values are the concepts that give meaning to an individual's life and serve as the framework for decision making. Hard work, honesty, sincerity, genuineness, and cleanliness are all examples of values. Values are based on societal norms, religion, and family orientation and assist in the decision-making process of everyday life. Law is a body of rules of actions or conduct that's prescribed by a controlling authority that has binding legal force. Laws are created as a means to control behavior and protect the public from danger. Law and ethics are closely related. Many times, law only expresses the minimum level of one's expectations of right and wrong, leaving ethics to fill the void. In these instances, behavior that would be considered legally acceptable may not be considered ethically acceptable. Consider the situation of a person who could save a drowning man but fails to make an attempt. Failing to make an attempt to save a drowning man may be legally correct if the law does not require a person to make such an attempt, but may be ethically incorrect and the person may be considered personally irresponsible for failing to make such an attempt. When we look at trying to distinguish differences between legal and ethical issues, it has become problematic. Ordinarily, one looks at ethics when there is no obvious right or wrong, when the enforcement of law does not appear to bring about justice, when the right behavior appears to bring about a wrong effect, or when personal sacrifice is the consequence of following ideals. One can also distinguish between legal and ethical issues by looking to consequences. Because ethics often touches upon an individual's principles of living, ethics is best understood by learning it as an abstract level and then applying it to a personal level. There are multiple approaches to ethical reasoning that have been developed over the centuries, and many of these approaches we're going to be discussing in this chapter. Abstract ideas or thoughts that deal with ethics are referred to as ethical concepts. And the concepts that we're going to discuss include autonomy, beneficence and non-maleficence, best interest standard, fidelity, and justice. Autonomy refers to independence, self-determination, or freedom. Respect for the individual and an expectation that an individual will make decisions in accordance with the individual's plan of choice are hallmarks of autonomy. There are three main elements that comprise autonomy, which include the ability to decide, the power to actualize or implement a decision, and a respect for the autonomy of others. Each of these elements must be present for autonomy to exist. For example, receipt of adequate information and the ability to understand information addresses the element of ability to decide, whereas treating others as unique and equal addresses the element of respect for the autonomy of others. Within the healthcare field, autonomy is embedded in the concept of informed consent. While autonomy is often viewed as freedom or individualism, some restrictions on autonomy do exist. The ethical dilemma around autonomy arises from the extent to which autonomy is curbed. For example, an individual has the right to scream fire even where no fire exists. If the screaming is done in a crowded theater, however, other individuals are impacted. This results in possible panic or injury exiting the theater. Accordingly, society has balanced these interests by discouraging an individual from falsely screaming fire and roundly criticizing those who do. There are two interlocking concepts in ethics known as beneficence and non-maleficence. Beneficence means the qualities of kindness, mercy, and charity. As seen in the ethical context, beneficence refers to the obligation to do good in all circumstances. Non-maleficence means the prohibition against doing harm. As seen in the ethical context, non-maleficence refers to the obligation to prevent evil or harm. The two concepts can be seen as opposites of each other. In the healthcare field, one's professional duty is impacted by two concepts, the concepts being beneficence and non-maleficence. Improving, not worsening, a patient's health is the expectation of providing healthcare services. Unfortunately, the delivery of healthcare services may result in a patient's health worsening. For example, adverse drug reactions, side effects of cancer treatments, and other serious diseases may occur. Reconciling the existence of unfortunate events and outcomes with these two concepts can be accomplished by applying the double effect principle. The double effect principle refers to the principle that recognizes that ethical choices may result in untoward outcomes. One may proceed with an ethical choice presenting a double effect if the untoward outcome is not the intended outcome but a secondary outcome and is outweighed by the intended positive or neutral outcome, the harm versus the benefit. Because healthcare providers do not intend harm in cases where infections and adverse drug reactions occur, and the patient has consented to the treatment resulting in side effects after gaining a thorough understanding of any associated risks and benefits, healthcare provider will be considered as having acted ethically. Determining what is in the best interest of an individual when the individual may not be able to make such a decision alone is the essence of the best interest standard. The ability to make a decision is generally determined by competency. For example, an individual who may be severely mentally retarded are generally considered people who cannot meet the criteria of competence as a matter of law. Additionally, the best interest standard often applies to individuals who once met the competency standard but are now considered incompetent due to illness or injury. When using this standard, the best decision making considers whether and how the individual will benefit or be harmed, examining mental, physical, and fiscal risks, and whether the individual ever expressed an opinion on the subject at issue. Within the healthcare field, the best interest standard is most often seen when a decision must be made about the direction of a patient's healthcare treatment and the patient is unable to provide informed consent. In such instances, healthcare providers look to past evidence of patients' expressed wishes, such as a living will or a power of attorney for healthcare, for guidance. Absent of such documents, healthcare providers may look to family members and guardians for guidance. If these steps do not determine the direction of treatment, a healthcare provider may then turn to the judicial system. Many famous cases involving healthcare treatment of incompetent patients have emerged in the last century. Famous cases include Karen Ann Quinlan, Nancy Cruzan, and Terry Schiavone. Some of these cases arose because of application of technology to healthcare, resulting in the prolonged life for a patient. Fidelity means faithfulness, loyalty, and devotion to one's obligations or duties. Fidelity is most often seen in the context of agreements and commitments between individuals. This concept undergirds much of the discussion on accountability because accountability is often measured by the level to which a person adheres to her responsibilities and obligations. Fidelity is sometimes addressed in the healthcare field in terms of the role each healthcare professional plays. In the healthcare world today, there are multiple professionals that attend to a patient's care. Each professional operates within constraints of acceptable practice, some of which are imposed by law and some of which are imposed by custom. Working within those constraints requires the healthcare professional to exercise fidelity to her role in treating the patient. An example is delivering and explaining a diagnosis to a patient for the first time is generally seen as the responsibility of the physician and not of the allied health professional. Justice refers to the obligation to be fair to all people. Justice encompasses different ideas, including fairness, honesty, and impartiality. The concept of justice can be then subdivided into two parts, comparative and distributive. Comparative justice refers to the balancing the competing interests of individuals and groups against one another, with no independent standard used to make this comparison. Distributed justice refers to the fair distribution of burdens and benefits using an independent standard. In the healthcare context, distributive justice often applies to questions raised about access to scarce resources, requiring healthcare providers and health plans to provide an individual recipient with the care and service she is due. The concept encompasses 6 criteria to define just distribution where resources are limited. These 6 criteria include the need, equity, contribution, ability to pay, effort, and merit, as is shown in this puzzle piece-like figure below. Rights refer to a just claim or entitlement, whether based on law, ethics, or morality, that others are obliged to respect. The concept of rights derives from the concept of justice in the sense that both involve obligations. Rights do not always encompass the ideas of fairness, honesty, and impartiality. The rights concept also relates to the autonomy concept in that both encompass the idea of self-determination. Rights can vary according to the moral values of a given culture. What might be considered a right in one culture may not be considered a right in another culture. Within the healthcare context, patient rights are often addressed in terms of confidentiality and privacy. Confidentiality refers to the obligation of the healthcare provider to maintain patient information in a manner that will not permit dissemination beyond the healthcare provider. Privacy refers to the right to be left alone or the right to control personal information. Both of these rights, confidentiality and privacy, have legal and ethical bases as they can be enforced through penalties and disapproval by one's peers. Both confidentiality and privacy are referred to in many ethical codes. Veracity refers to the habitual truthfulness and honesty. It's the opposite of practice of intentionally deceiving or misleading. While the concept seems straightforward in practice, the concept is less clear because situations may arise where not telling the truth can potentially be argued as justified to protect another person. In the healthcare field, veracity is seen in the special relationship between the patient and healthcare provider. It is important to the patient's care that she inform a healthcare provider of all relevant information pertaining to her health. Failure to do so may result in misdiagnosis or improper treatment. Veracity also plays a role in medical research. The research subject may be informed of all information pertaining to the research and its potential effect upon her health. Some medical research involves the use of placebos, medically innate substances that are used as control in testing the effectiveness of another medicated substance. In essence, the placebo is form of a deception since the research subject does not know whether she has received the real medication or the placebo when participating in the research trial. Ethical theories refer to systematic statements or plans of principles used to deal with ethical dilemmas. These theories exist so that individuals, organizations, and groups act consistently and coherently when making ethical decisions. These theories contrast with ethical concepts which do not rise to the level of a systemic statement or plan. Two main ethical theories exist, and they are known as utilitarianism and deontology. Utilitarianism, sometimes referred to as consequentialism, proposes that everyone, including persons, organizations, and society in general, should make choices that promote the greatest balance of good over harm for everyone. Under this theory, society promotes conditions that would allow an individual to seek the greatest amount of happiness or benefits. Utilitarianism encourages consideration of the effects of actions on everyone involved in a situation, not merely the effects upon one individual. In application, utilitarianism is often used when preparing a cost-benefit analysis. Now, a cost-benefit analysis looks at all possible options and considers them. The utility or the value of each option is determined, and that option that possesses the highest total utility is then chosen. The net benefits are compared against costs to reach a decision, and the option that offers society to the best benefits at the least cost or offers businesses the greatest return for the lowest cost is seen as the logical choice. Utilitarianism has been used to justify the capitation approach of managed care organizations in the healthcare field. Weaknesses are present with utilitarianism. Some have interpreted this theory to support the principle of the end justifying the means. Using this interpretation, even immoral acts can be justified if substantial benefits will be afforded to a majority of people, even though the minority may face unbearable costs. Another weakness is the difficulty present in identifying and measuring all of the possible benefits that may result from a decision, since this involves looking to the future and making, at best, informed predictions. Deontology is sometimes referred to as formalism or duty orientation. It asserts that the ethical decision-making is based on moral rules and unchanging principles that are derived from reason and can be applied universally. These universal rules and principles must be considered separately from the consequences or the facts of a particular situation. By looking to the intrinsic nature of an act to determine its basic rightness or wrongness, the consequences of the act are considered irrelevant. The fundamental principle of deontology is called the categorical imperative, which means a command derived from a principle that does not allow exceptions. The categorical imperative requires application of unconditional commands in a similar manner in all situations without exception. Similar to other ethical theories, deontology poses weaknesses. Because it does not consider a variety of real-life situations that create ethical dilemmas and allows no exceptions, it's often considered as overly rigid. Additionally, the disregard for consequences derived from actions may lead to absurd results, such as when one obeys the letter of the law to such an extent that it conflicts with the spirit of the law. Furthermore, some disagree that people's motivations are derived from universal values, but argue that they actually derive from changing values instead. The study of ethics has been present throughout centuries. Ethics assists individuals in reaching moral choices that conform to standards of conduct. In the next chapter, we'll go ahead and review ethical decisions and challenges, and it will be growing on the information that was taught in Chapter 5, Ethical Standards.